Hi, I'm Camille Cheng and I support OneTeam.
Pull up.
I mean, I guess the why it could have a lot of other um, terms for it. It could be, your goal, it could be motivation, it could be purpose. I think you can substitute it for that word with a lot of things. I think for me, I didn't really think about the why I was swimming until much later in my career. Um, Looking back, I can kind of see how the progression of the why changing. I've been in the sport for over 20 years now, and why I was swimming when I was really young is very different, and also not to today. Foundationally, it's I love being in the water. When I was really young, it was about um, it did a lot for my confidence. So I was very shy, timid, and being good in swimming gave me a lot of confidence that then had a ripple effect in other areas of my life. One of the things I like about swimming is that you kind of have control. How much effort you put in is usually reflected in the performance. So for me, it was about how good can I be in this sport and how far can this sport take me? Not really knowing, is this Olympics? Is it not? It was just, there's more for me in this sport. And then I went to university and I had an opportunity to swim collegiately. And that really was when, my swimming performances really got a lot better. And that I was like, oh, maybe the Olympic dream can become a reality. And then that continued into, okay, my why is now like, I want to go to the Olympics. And then after the Olympics, you've reached this goal and it's like, okay, well, what now? What's next? And for me, it was this moment where I was like, okay, now that I have a voice and a platform as an Olympian, how can I use that, to share my story, to, what more is there that I can learn from this sport and how can I grow in this sport? There's so much that swimming has to offer, at least for me, that was beyond the performance of it itself, which is what motivated me to keep going. Part of that was kind of like the mental aspect of performance and of sport. And having then gone to Tokyo, which was a very, very different experience as well, it's evolved as I've continued in this sport, which, I think to be doing something for so long, there needs to be something to keep you in it. And for me, that's just changed um, several times over the years. There was a time where it was like, okay, I've achieved this Olympic goal or this Olympic dream. Maybe it's time for something else. And I just felt like there was still more for me in the sport. And like I said, it wasn't maybe that I would go a faster time or that I would place or rank higher, but that there was more for me to do in the sport, whether it was giving back to the community or it was for my own personal growth and development. And I think for me, swimming has been one of like the greatest teachers of things of life, life lessons. And I think there's still more in there. At some point, I know I'm gonna have to walk away from the sport. As long as my physical body can can keep going, I'm gonna see, how far I can get out of swimming and also give back.
Pull up.
I think that's a little bit part of my why since the last Olympics was, I think I struggled personally with a lot of issues around self-confidence, around self-worth, self-esteem. Even when I achieved, this dream or, now having this title as an Olympian. For me, it was a little bit post Olympics is like, who am I? What do I do if I'm not a swimmer? And kind of going through all of that myself. When I think about continuing to swim and being open about my own journey. And for me, it's a little bit about when I think of when I do swimming clinics or when I see younger kids at swimming competitions or when I train with younger kids, a lot of the questions that they ask me are not really about how do you swim faster. It's not about the technique. It's not necessarily about the technical aspect of swimming, which it's actually more all these mental concepts about how do you stay motivated, or like, I feel really burnt out, I'm trying to juggle rigorous academic programs plus the swimming plus whatever extracurriculars they're also in, which is a lot for these young kids. And then the last 2 years you add on COVID, there's no social support system, no opportunity to be face to face. This idea of what am I doing, what's the next thing, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown. And I think for me, that's in this space that I feel quite passionate about. And I'd like to have a voice in it as I'm still a swimmer, and then once I'm even done um, competitively, let's say, or retire from professional swimming, it's still this space that I want to be in, because athlete or not, the youth, I think they're all kind of going through this struggle around mental well-being. And I think it's going to take a lot more people to share their own stories, have conversations. There needs to be more tools and resources and support, especially for the youth. So it is definitely a space that I want to be involved in. And not just the youth. There's I think everyone has been struggling in some way, with especially with the pandemic. One is having conversations. I think there needs to be a lot done around like destigmatization around the terms around like mental health, mental well-being, the idea of psychology, counseling, therapy. Because there was a time where I was thinking of going into clinical psychology, but I thought, I want to be on the preventative side of things. I often think about it as like physical health. A lot of people every day are going to the gym or doing an exercise class or walking, all for their or for their physical health. If you think about like your mental muscles, it's not viewed the same way as your physical muscles. Like, I think every day people should be doing something that's good for their mental health. And so not until there comes a point where you're, let's say, ill, that then you do something. And I think we're a little bit, I don't want to like generalize, but just in Hong Kong, you read all these news and you read all these statistics about the youth and around all these mental health issues, and you really have to think, okay, what is being done? And they spend most of their time at schools, so schools need to be a big point of having these conversations, one, but also having the support. And I think also understanding that probably for a lot of these kids, a lot of the stress and the emotional and mental struggles are also coming from a lot of the pressures of school. At least from what I've seen in the last few years already, there's a lot more already about having more conversations. And I think it's how can we speed up this process before, it's, I don't want to say too late, but before this problem gets even bigger. When I feel burnt out, it's literally like my body refuses to move, and I feel very, very weak in the water. I feel very weak in the gym, and you just feel like no motivation. Your goals that you were once so passionate about achieving, now you're like, oh, who cares? And I think for me, I came from a like just quite conditioned to be very achievement oriented, like do well in swimming, do well in school. When you're done with a goal, what's next? What's next? What's next? And part of like my growth has been learning to slow down a bit. I remember after the Rio Olympics, like the week after, um, like my dad was like, okay, so what's next? And I remember being like, hold on, like I've just worked, 8+ years for this goal. I think I can like take a break. But I was so conditioned, like you don't take a break. In swimming, like 2 weeks off maybe. And since then it's been something I've worked really hard to um like uncondition, I guess. And how can I have time for myself every day that's doing something good for my body, my mind. And 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 I think part of it is that I've had to figure out what works best for me. And that's why, like, when people ask me, like, for advice or tips and stuff like that, I can't really, I can share what has worked for me, but I think it's quite an individualized um thing. Like, some days, because I'm in a very physical profession that can be very demanding, it's been like, okay, I need to work on my communication with my coaches. If I'm feeling really tired or feeling, very weak, then I need to be like, can we take it easier? Maybe instead of a swimming session, I'm doing something more restorative, like yoga. Or maybe it's, I'm going to the ocean and I'm just swimming without a distance, without a time to log, but I'm still moving. Or I'm going on a hike somewhere in Hong Kong. And I think that's been really helpful for me, especially, I've been in the sport for a long time. So to change things up a bit and not just, staring at the bottom of the pool hours and hours and hours. With burning out, it takes a lot of self awareness, like being able to identify what your tendencies are. And for me, there was a lot of time where I was just getting sick very often. And so when I was getting sick or when I was getting injured, then it forced me to take a break. And then in that break, it's, pretty much your body screaming like, you need to rest, stop moving around. And I've like had to learn to, start to saying no to things. And all of these things were quite tough in the beginning, because, the narrative that I was telling myself, oh, if I say no to this, that means I'm being selfish. But if I can't take care of myself, if I can't show up as my best, then I'm not going to be good around others. Especially when you're in a team, you don't want to be the person around the team that's bringing the team down. And I think that starts with taking care of yourself first. I think one of the things I've learned is also, there's time for training, and then there's time to also rest and relax. And if you don't give yourself that time, you're not going to be able to show up um, better, or ready, prepared for your training. And I think it's the same thing with whatever people are doing, whether it's they're working all day, but then when they go home, if they feel like they're continuing the work day at home, and then they wake up, it's like they're just at work constantly. And I think it's really important to carve out time that is kind of, a break, whether it's a physical break or a mental break, finding what will give you, that space to breathe, so then you can come back, at your best. And I think that's very applicable to whatever people are doing. It's not just, in sport or in the creative field. But I think it's more that preventative thing, rather than, you wait until, like, there's been times where I pushed so hard and then I was injured with, shoulder tendonitis. And rather than having taken maybe a few days off when I should have, I just pushed through. But then when you push through, then you're out for maybe a few weeks. So, at the end, that does more harm than good. And I should have just, been like, okay, my shoulder's starting to hurt. Let me just back off now. And that's something that I've learned to get better at. And I think that's, I mean, everybody will learn, their limits and how to be smarter. I'm doing well, I guess. I was going through a bit of a hard time with, stuff in my personal life, and then also with swimming, deciding, especially after the Tokyo Olympics, do you keep going? Do you not? And I was quite ready to retire after Tokyo, but there was Asian Games that was just, less than a year after. So I was like, okay, let me just do one more Asian Games. And then that's been postponed now till next year. So, and it's been a lot of time spent asking myself, why if I were to continue swimming, is it for the right reasons? Is it because other people want you to do it? Is it because, external pressure, or is it because you really want to? And if it is because you want to, what are the reasons why? I'm at a point in my life now where I still love swimming and I am competitive, but there's more to life than swimming. And for years and years, I've made so many sacrifices and compromises, for example, seeing my family, now I have like friends getting married, like big life events. And before it was always like, I can't be there, I'm training, I can't be there, I'm competing. And now it's about finding a routine and that balance where I can still enjoy all these things outside of swimming that are important to me, and make time for things outside of the sport, and still find a routine that works with a training program that I trust and believe in. So now it's kind of just finding that routine that works for me with the right balance, and of course having the right support and the people in your corner, and communicating that as well. So I would say overall pretty good.